feedback afterwards. So we really appreciate you all being here, and we hope you can enjoy the great content that Martin has prepared. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you very much. Also, thank you to Nadine. I'm sure you've been in touch with her. She explained a little bit of the programs and the idea of this SIMS project. So I will share my screen now and start. The idea will be to make 2 hours sharp, and then we will see if there are questions in the end. Of course, you can raise your hand and at any time, and I will try to see. And also, if I ask some questions, if you want to answer in the chat, I can also read from the chat your questions. Okay, let's see if I can share now. All right. So a very quick explanation. I'm sure you've been already briefed about the SIMS project, Sport Inclusion Media Seal, co-funded by the European Union. And the idea is to showcase the media outlets' commitment to unbiased, factual sports reporting and inclusive storytelling. Is not only relevant, but also essential for enhancing reputation and aligning with values that foster a better society. So important that all participants will receive an individual certificates that you've taken part in this webinar. And there's also the actual seal that will go to your media outlets. The individual certificates is important because in the future, maybe you can change your place of work and you will still have the individual certificate saying that you were interested in this Sport Inclusion Media Seal. All right, so all this you already know. So a little bit of what we will see, diversity and inclusion, the full scale of what these concepts mean and why they are crucial, inclusive sports journalism, a new approach that we will try to inspire you to follow, the framework and also the user-friendly focus that I will try to explain. I will stop my screen now for a second and share again with the actual presentation I've prepared. Okay, here we are. There we are. So these are all the partners that Elena mentioned. I represent AIPS. AIPS is the International Sports Press Association. It's the umbrella association of 161 national associations. It was founded 100 years ago, 1924, in Paris. And this year we had the centennial, the celebration of the 100th anniversary in Paris at the UNESCO headquarters. Some of you might have been there. It was during the Olympic Games, so a very busy moment to celebrate, but still there were more than 400 journalists in the main auditorium of the UNESCO headquarters. And this is part of the idea that sport is also culture, that represents the thinking of our president, Gianni Merlo. And this is why there are so many initiatives of AIPS involving sport and culture. This is the new initiative, the Sport Inclusion Media Seal. So our goal, I already mentioned this, important words that we will try to understand and learn here, the precise wording, the unbiased sports reporting, which is very difficult. It's very easy to say, it's very difficult to succeed. And this is a little bit of the structure that we will follow. So a little bit of a history lesson to start, because everyone wants to start probably with what to do now. I will show you what was the challenge, or what was the tide, how the sea went 100 years ago. This is during the Olympics in 1936, and this is the chronicle of the San Francisco Chronicle, actually, on Jesse Owens' world record at the time. And you can see, even if it's a chronicle, there are some words that today would be very, very difficult to read and very unfortunate to read on some serious media outlets. The two colored boys. It's important to say that English is the official language of this workshop, but each of us, or most of us, speak a different mother tongue. And in some of our languages is still, I wouldn't say normal, but it's still possible to see some kind of these remarks, which I said, it's already unfortunate in 1936, so imagine now. This is another chronicle, the Baltimore News Post, the Ohio Negro. It's the way that they refer to Jesse Owens. And what about this guy? We don't know much about Jack Torrance, maybe, but in the description of the same performance in the Olympics, it's written in the Baltimore News Post that he had an alderman's belly. What's an alderman's belly? Well, the alderman was an assistant of the mayor of each town, and it was normal to see fat people assisting the mayor. So an alderman's belly, it's a way of saying that he had too much weight. Again, these are ways that were used to describe people at the time they were normal. We move to Time magazine now, and this is the very first issue of Time magazine, so exactly 100 years ago. Describing a senator, Robinson, it's written, born with a red-headed temper, he soon acquired freckles. But then years of law and politics have induced a certain amiability. So what's a red-headed temper, you know? And well, Time, at the time that it was founded, the founder was Henry Luce, one of the two founders, and he had the idea that the characters needed to be described because they were not described enough. Imagine it was a world without television, without social media, without anything. So the media, the print media, was key in describing what the characters look like. But these descriptions sometimes they backfire. So they started to speak about the legs, the noses, the waists of the people that they described. And it was okay for some time until there was a critical point in which they described Franklin Roosevelt's legs in a way that it hadn't been described in the past. Franklin Roosevelt was not able to walk, but many people didn't know this. The disease was part of the polio fever that he had when he was a child. And still, the people didn't know about this. And they described Roosevelt as the man of the withered legs. This backfired completely. There were a lot of people accusing the magazine for lack of decency, lack of taste, lack of judgment, and they started to send letters. It was the way that people protested 100 years ago. Now there is social media. In the end, there was a sort of decision based on the quantity of letters Time received. 238 against this kind of description, 252 in favor. So Time said, we'll continue to considering Roosevelt's legs are worth mentioning unless the big majority of readers opine the contrary. But there was a moment in which they had to say it's enough. It was an internal memo. John Gielgud, you can see him on the right. He was a very famous actor, then director as well. And he has been described as an intelligent and sensitive Englishman with a nose the size of a hockey disc. The memo said, please, no more jokes about Gielgud's nose. What truly hurts people is the reference of the physical features, and this affects readers that have no personal attachment to the character. This doesn't mean to stop describing physical patterns, but this should show our journalistic ability, sensitivity, sense of responsibility. From now on, if a king looks like a dentist, or if someone's nose is as big as a hockey disc, this should be for the best possible reasons considered by Time. So the idea of, yes, we describe, we can make jokes. There was a moment in which they decided that some of the people that they wanted to attract, the readers, felt hurt because of the way people was being described. And of course, because some of them maybe felt an insult to themselves. Fast forward a little bit, and we have Rashford, Sancho, and Saka missing 3 penalty spots in the Euro. This came with a lot of social media abuse to these players, their accounts, their following, their followers tried to defend, but it was too much. The abuse and violence they received. 3 black players who missed penalty kicks. So the idea of putting black player in the title and in the intro, these are 2 different media outlets, was very unfortunate, because in the end it looked like the media were targeting the players as well. There was no need to put the word black, because in the end they are players from England that were subject of racism. The black word there is completely superfluous. Actually, it's a danger to the media reputation. In the end, they had to say, we were sorry to use this wording. This has nothing to do with the intentions, which is something that I will try to explain later. The intentions can be very, very good, but a poor choice of words can backfire. I have a Jude Bellingham's quote there that seemed very much more mature than some of the media outlets that explain this. We had players, black players in the team, players of all different backgrounds from all different countries. And then as soon as they miss the penalty, they're not English, they're just black. Anyone could miss a penalty, yes, we know that. So I have another example here. Adebayo Akinfenwa. He became a sort of a cult icon because his body didn't look like the typical body of a professional footballer. And this led to a lot of followers, actually, a very, I would say, international, well-known international player without playing international games. But there was a moment in which he felt offended by some of the other team's assistants who repeatedly called him a fat water buffalo. And this situation was reported here. I think it's The Guardian that reported this as the news. Akinfenwa says something very, very interesting. Taking a knee, supporting social media campaigns, and wearing a logo on our kits is a start, but it's not enough. It will not result in real and long-standing change. The real work must start now, and the only way to move forward collectively is through education. By the way, the denounce of the people that call him a fat water buffalo was disregarded by the FA, the Football Association. They said it was not racism. Akinfenwa says that the idea of dehumanizing black people, comparing black people to animals, is indeed a racist remark. But in any case, this is part of what the world was in 1924, 1936, and the world now, with a little bit of the same situations. How to describe people, if they are fat, if they are thin, if they're skinny, if they are black, if they are white, if they are... So the thing still is going on. This is the refugee team of the World Athletics Under-20 Championships. These people are from South Sudan, and the manager in the coach in the yellow jersey there, he's from Burundi. All of them live in Kenya, in one of the biggest refugee camps in the world, Kakuma. And some of the people that were following this or tried to find an angle, every time there is a competition, they look at the refugees, the athletes, or now that they compete even in the Olympics, the refugee team. But do we really care about the refugees, or is it just a piece of news? So this is the coverage. I was there, so I can say the people that I showed you there, they went to visit the city of Lima in Peru. Imagine they are confined in a refugee camp, having escaped from South Sudan, and suddenly they are there and they feel amazed because it's the first time they see the ocean. Now, the idea that there is a refugee team competing in Lima is okay, but it's not enough to make a story. But what about these kids that see the ocean for the first time while competing in the World Athletics Under 20 Championships. That's a story that immediately connects the readers with the main characters, which are these kids, and introduces them, the readers, to a very, very difficult situation that is happening nowadays in South Sudan and in many other countries as well. So the approach is very different, and the approach allows the people to connect with the stories rather than just reading or watching a piece of news that immediately goes away, nothing stuck in your mind. The problems, and we need to acknowledge this, is that first of all, we are full of biases. The biases, there's nothing wrong to having biases. The important thing is to understand that we are full of biases. The second problem is that there is no proper framework. And the third problem is that there is a lack of proper inclusive agenda. So we are full of biases, yes, but are we full of empathy? Are we capable of understanding and making something out of the refugees on top of the normal news about the refugees? Do we want to connect with them in order to tell their stories? Or are we just commissioned to write about the refugees and that's it? Next time it's going to be the transfer market. That's the question for the first problem. For the second problem, there is no proper framework. Well, I'm very happy that we are here in the SIMS project because there are modules that you will receive or in your mail that you can follow. There are glossary that is very, very interesting and took a lot of people to our partners to put that document together. It's a work in progress. It's gonna be a work in progress every time because things are changing, new challenges are waiting. And there is the lack of proper inclusive agenda. Yes, let's build that together. Let's build that agenda together. Now, one of the problems is that there are some sport inclusive content in very important media, but this happened a little bit of by accident. There is not like a structure that tries to go following these kind of stories. I will show you later some examples. So the inclusive agenda is very easy actually. It starts with what's a genuine sports inclusive tournament competition gathering, and then it goes to the days, for example, the days that certain things are celebrated. You know, there is the World Day for autism, for example, and there are many, but you need to figure that out in advance to have the proper agenda. It's a calendar, I mean. So diversity, I will read the definition there by the European Commission 1998. Differences in the values, attitudes, cultural perspective, beliefs, ethnic background, sexual orientation, gender identity, skills, knowledge, and life experiences of each individual in any group of people. If I move to the Cambridge Dictionary, there are the fact of many different types of things of people being included in something, a range of different things of people, cultural diversity, ethnic diversity. Diversity is also the mixture of races and religions that make up a group of people. My question is, how would you define diversity in your own words? If you would like to put that in the chat, how would you define diversity in your own words? Don't look into the dictionary. It's not about that. It's just a way of decoding our minds a little bit. What's diversity to you? So I need a brave one that at least answers. There. Elena, okay. Diversity is to have as many as types of people represented. Okay, we start with something. It's very important. I want to read you. How would you explain diversity to a 5-year-old, to a 10-year-old? What is diversity? To give everyone a voice. Yes, including people of different genders, races, ethnicities, sexual orientation, etc. Diversity refers to these differences can include a variety of factors such as race, gender, and cultural backgrounds. Thank you, Panagiota. Nice to see you here, Panagiota. Having a mix of complementary variety of human beings. To accept and be in peace with someone or something, even if you don't like someone or something. Okay, to show each us is different and still we are all equal. Thank you, Voicech. Nice to see you here as well. For me, it's important to have this diverse range of backgrounds and experiences so that we can learn about how other people live and experience the world. It builds our compassion and empathy for others. It teaches us that there are many different ways in which people experience life. Thank you, Claire. So this is how we start, building our own definition of diversity. And then, of course, we can check if we are correct or not. But this is not, I need to learn diversity's definition by heart because it's something that it's in your heart, actually. It's in your soul to understand what diversity is in order to report about diversity. So I move to the next one, which is inclusion. And I have the official definition in our glossary, actually, the removal of physical, cultural, economic barriers, including social attitudes, to ensure that no one is excluded from sport or physical activity. True inclusion involves authentic and empowered participation and a true sense of belonging for all participants. I have the definitions from the Cambridge Dictionary as well. The idea that everyone should be able to use the same facilities, take part in the same activities, including people who have disability or other disadvantage. The act of allowing many different types of people to do something and treating them fairly and equally. What about inclusion? What do you think about inclusion? Because here, even in two different definitions, there are way too much differences. So what's your own take of inclusion? What does inclusion mean to you? Again, you can put it in the chat. Okay, we have two definitions already. Martina from Croatia. Inclusion means making sure everyone feels welcome and has a chance to be part of the group, no matter how different they are. Inclusion is that everybody is and feels welcome. says Bart, sorry, need my glasses. Any other definitions of inclusion? Building a group that represents diversity. So, voicage, giving a chance for everyone, for everybody, says Marco. Nice to see you, Marco, as well here. Benas, people should have equal opportunities regardless of their differences. Claire says, to be able to be inclusive and ensure a particular activity or facility, you need to be able to remove the different barriers listed in definition first. By doing this, you're able to have a more diverse group and all learn from each other. Inclusion is to adapt activities to remove barriers regardless of the person, says Elena. Okay, so I think it's enough. The idea of inclusion, someone once told me in Spanish, but it's the same in English. Be attentive with the word inclusion, because it's very important that you have the correct definition. If you think inclusion as one dominant group, including someone with disadvantage, with a difference, it means that the power is still in the dominant group. And therefore, the inclusion is that someone includes someone else. So I think it's important to understand that the definition here in our glossary, the number 1, in this case applies because the real inclusion is the removal of all barriers in order to allow integration in an organic way, not because you have a quota, for example, of inclusion. We can see there are many different strategies, and I'm not speaking about sport journalism now, about human resources. Yes, we need a quota, we need a number of, because we need to show ourselves that we are inclusive. Well, it could work as starters, but do we want quotas as a promotion of inclusion, or do we want to remove or free all barriers in order to allow all people to join? So this is a very, very different conception. So now we need to focus on the inclusive sports journalism, which is something that let's be real, it wasn't in the agenda, and I think that's the importance of this SIMS project, because it puts something new in the agenda, the inclusive sports journalism. And this is a philosophy that implies a new approach and therefore an evolution of the sports media and their journalists, becoming promoters of inclusive sports instead of mere communicators. This new approach implies covering inclusive sport activities, but also non-genuine inclusive sport activities from an inclusive approach. So before we go into some examples, I want to say something. The idea that we become promoters is under no circumstance a problem in the ethics of being a journalist, because when you're a journalist, you're told that you need to communicate, and you need to communicate what is happening. And some will say from an objective, will say from a subjective approach. Depending on which university you attend, you will listen to many different explanations about how to be balanced, factual, and not being an activist, but a journalist. This is not a challenge to that concept, because by becoming promoter of inclusive sport, you're not breaking any of these rules. Instead of mere communicators. I will show you later exactly what I mean about this, because the same topic, if you are just a communicator, sometimes communicators are bureaucrats. They read what they have to read, they write what they have to write, and then they move on to the next story without caring. If you really care about the stories, you can become a promoter of this kind of content, because the content, I will prove that it's engaging, it's good, it's positive, it has good reactions, it has a legacy, and it allows everyone, from the readers to the journalists, to feel better. So, inclusive events, because I said here, covering inclusive events. Examples, because many of you will think inclusive events, the Paralympics. Yes, it's an inclusive event, but there are many, many more inclusive events. You don't have to think of inclusive events, people with disabilities. There is not just physical disabilities. So in this case, the Special Olympics. The Special Olympics are a global sports movement to end discrimination against people with intellectual disabilities. So no physical disabilities, but intellectual disabilities. The Special Olympics, almost 4 million athletes, 227 national and state programs, 177 countries and jurisdictions, 46,000 competitions globally per year, 5 games every hour across the globe. These are some statistics about the Special Olympics. Now, honestly, how many of you knew about the Special Olympics? Did you know about the Special Olympics? Did you know that this kind of movement existed? Or it's the first time? And I'm not judging, I'm just saying that there are a lot of things happening that we ignore. Ignore because we don't know, ignore because we feel it's not important, ignore because we feel our media outlet won't care about that, ignore because we think the audience will not be interested in this. Another inclusive competition, in this case, it was a one day. UEFA's Equal Game. Equal Game is a movement created by UEFA to allow people with all kinds of backgrounds and abilities to play football together, the Equal Game. I was there. This was in Lyon before the Europa League final a few years ago. I took this picture. Figo was smiling here, but a few minutes later, he wasn't smiling at all because he was asked to put the mask that people with viewing problems use in order to play football. And with this mask, he wasn't able to touch the ball. He didn't touch the ball. It was probably the only time in his football career that he couldn't touch the ball because he couldn't see. And this was very, very interesting to see how people with different abilities could all have fun together. This is also part of a campaign by UEFA. What's your nearest inclusive sporting event? Do you have an idea? maybe you can put it in the chat if you know that there is some inclusive sporting event taking place in your country, in your town, in your city soon. You can write in the chat. I will go forward, but you can write in the chat if you know that there is a. Elena asks, amateur or professional wise? This is also very interesting, Elena, because in the end, as journalists, that we are trying to showcase nice stories, engaging content. The idea of amateur or professional does not make a real difference. We have to be looking for good stories. And the Special Olympics, of course, it's not a professional because they are not professionals. They are not paid to do sports, but it's one of the greatest experiences that you can have as a journalist to be able to cover this event. The next one I think will take place in the next big one will take place in Torino in Italy in March. But so Andrea says, nice to read you, Andrea. There are Special Olympics competitions in Romania, wheelchair tennis tournaments also. Okay, so now in our minds, we already know, we understand what's an inclusive sporting event is. I've taken this from the BBC last week, 2 weeks ago. Down's syndrome event. This was organized by Charlton Football Club with some partners, and there is a football festival taking place there. Now we start a little bit on the how to say that these events are taking place. This was an announcement, a preview, probably a statement they received and they published. There were 2 quotes, but one of the organizers and one of the partners. There was no follow-up on this, unfortunately. And if you really wanted to know what happened, because this was the day before, you had to go in the Charlton's website. And there you can see faces, you can see expressions, you can see and cherish some moments. But you see, one of the problems there is that maybe by accident we publish something, we don't care. I'm saying this personally. I'm not pointing my finger to anyone on these examples, but we have too many duties, we have too many emails to answer, and then the next day we forget. And the real stories were here. And it's not even a media outlet, even if we are now competing with football clubs and different kind of companies that all share the same environment of content in the digital world. Everyone wants to produce content, but yes, this is a sport inclusive event that maybe took place very, very close of where you live, and there was no real coverage of mainstream media. I have some answers here. My high school organizes the Day of Sport for children with different disabilities, physical and intellectual, from our city every year in December. As I remember this, once I was an announcer, once I was a guide for a blind participant. It was an eye-opening event for us as kids at school. Yes, I can imagine. Kai, nice to read you, Kai. I compete in the World Transplant Games every 2 years. So the World Transplant Games, another example, I could have put it here in the slides as well. Did you know that the Transplant Games exist? Do you know that they are taking place every 2 years or something? It's a valuable source of stories. And then it's a sport inclusive event. So we understand the first group, the sport inclusive events. What about the non-genuine inclusive events, but with an inclusive approach? The UEFA Super Cup final. So it's not a sport inclusive event, it's the football final between the winners of the Champions League and the Europa League. During this game, Jan Belkovsky from North Macedonia asked his grandfather to take this photo. He saw the big picture of Cristiano Ronaldo and he wanted to celebrate with Cristiano Ronaldo's fashion. It was a fantastic photo taken by the grandfather. So this is important as well. What's the source of this photo? Is it a journalist? Is it a media outlet? Or is it someone else? Well, it's someone else. The journalists were probably naturally following the game. But the inclusive approach didn't allow anyone to understand that this was a valuable moment. You can say, well, they were not there. They were not in the hall. They were already in the press tribune. Yes, taken. But do we really have our eyes open when we go to a UEFA Super Cup final, or are we only thinking about reporting what's going to happen in the game? Actually, how many of you can tell me which game this was? Again, difficult. And many of you will probably remember this photo. So in terms of the viral content that you can produce, this happened to be much more important than the game itself. We didn't know this in advance, but if our eyes are not open, well, we miss the moment. UEFA, of course, found out about this photo and asked the kid, the parents, to publish this photo because this photo became viral. And what happened then? If you remember the photos I showed you before from the Europa League final, the kid was invited to take place in not only in this event, but he was invited to visit Old Trafford and other stadiums, and the kid became an inspirational story, not just for himself, for the relatives, but also for kids with similar challenges. So from an invisible situation, now we have a face, we have a name, we have interviews with this kid, and then we have other kids that will say, hey, I have cerebral palsy as well, but I can be a goalkeeper as well playing with my friends. I will join the football game in a kick around here around my neighborhood. So this was the most important thing, not just to feature one story, but to follow up, to give a name, to give the feeling, because otherwise it's a kid celebrates as Cristiano Ronaldo. This is like the caption, you know, a kid without a name celebrates as Cristiano Ronaldo during the UEFA Cup, and then we move on. But if we want to know more about the kid, the reaction could be as positive as this one. So I've divided the content of this workshop into 4 parts. I assigned 1 letter to each, just because you will, a lot of times you will listen that you need to be user-friendly, you need to create a user-friendly experience, user-based or whatever. So, okay, let's be user-friendly. Understand, search, execute, and reflect. Understand. The first part of having an inclusive approach is to understand. What do we need to understand? Our wording. Each line makes a difference. How we choose to depict and present stories can provide a positive or a negative view from the audience, increase sectarianism, or embrace diversity in a natural way. So in this case, it's our call, especially if you're editor, how do we present this story? I have a lot of examples. I hope I can show you all of them or some of them, but again, it makes sense when you see some of the examples, because I'm not judging the intentions. As I said, there could be some ill intentions sometimes, yes. People with agendas, yes. But normally, it's people that have good intentions, but the idea of choosing the wrong word can make the full castle to collapse immediately. The use of photos as well. Which photo do you use to present your story? Well, that's a critical choice, because that's immediately going to create a reaction from the people that are following those stories. Could be on social media, could be on your digital website, could be on print, if some of you still work on print. The photo and the title, of course, and then the approach, the intro. There are lots of critical decisions that we need to make in order to understand that we are presenting a sport inclusive story. So our approach, our bias against the editorial line, understanding the biases, individual biases, the outlet biases, and the editorial line is important. Of course, we are speaking about sports, so the editorial lines of some of the media outlets that you represent are not that important. We are not speaking about politics, we are not speaking about social situations, but some of you can work in newsrooms, in the sports part of the newsroom that is part of something bigger, which is a group of newspapers, a newspaper that covers politics, wars, social situation, economy. So we need to understand, is the editorial line aligned with the words I'm going to choose? And if not, do I have my own bias, thinking that I cannot publish something because it will go against? Can you possibly think that speaking about the refugees in South Sudan will go against some editorial lines? Of course, it's impossible, but you need to understand this. Reputation and freedom of speech. Some concepts I want to share. The freedom of speech, of course, we aim for freedom of speech, that everyone has the right of saying and publishing, yes. But there is also a social media policy. And the social media policy that might not be written in your in your media outlet. Maybe you receive what you can do and what you can't do. But the social media policy, first of all, you need to create and set your own social media policy. So if there is an earthquake, will I share my thoughts for the people that are affected by the earthquake? And if the earthquake took place in Europe, will I send my thoughts? And if it's taking place in Asia, will I also send my thoughts? Now we have the floods in Valencia, critical situation, awful situation. How do we react to that? Yes, we are sports journalists. Yes. How do we react to that? Because you can choose to say, no, you know, I only speak about sports and I don't want to be involved in any of this. And then you're missing the point, because there was a viral video of kids playing football, and those kids were invited. I couldn't add in the presentation, but were invited by Marca's director to a prize yesterday, and they were on stage with the manager of Spain and with some very famous footballers. And it was a fantastic way of involving, being inclusive from the cover of your own media outlet. So again, you can think, no, why to put this? Well, because there were floods in Porto Alegre as well this year in Brazil, and maybe you missed that. So the idea of being inclusive and finding inclusive stories, even in sport, can apply not only to the country where you live, but also other countries. And then it goes the reputation. My views, what does it mean? Maybe some of you have put my views in your Twitter, X, Instagram, threads, or whatever. My views. Does it mean anything? My views? Because I remember there was a journalist that used to collaborate with CNN, and he wrote, the world needs a new Hitler. And after that, it took less than half hour for CNN to say he collaborated in the past, but he's under no way a journalist contracted by CNN. And what do you expect if you write that kind of things? Yes, it's freedom of speech, yes, but you need to be respectful, and your reputation will sink. And especially your media outlet's reputation will sink if you have the wrong approach and the wrong use of words. So before reporting about a sensitive issue, you need to understand that the issue is indeed sensitive, because if you didn't understand that, then you're going to be wrong. And once you report, you need to be extra careful about the word you use, the approach, and how can that affect your own reputation. We need to start searching for these stories, because in the end, not many editors will allow you to be in a webinar for 2 hours every day. You know, you need to find your own content to report. So there are two ways. You bump into a story by accident. Yes, it can happen. As I showed you before, it can happen that, yes, there is the refugee team. Yeah. Or you go search for those kind of contents. And the searching part is very important, because I start with a different approach. It's a very common thing, cliche, to read that we are looking for a different kind of journalism, different approach for stories. You will read this in many languages. But if we are supposed to search for a different journalism, why are we standardizing the coverage? Why the coverage becomes standard? It becomes a commodity that you can read the same news in different newspapers, in different digital websites, on social media as well, it's the same. You can replace, it's a commodity. There is nothing different. There is no texture. There is no soul in those kind of stories. And then we complain because artificial intelligence is coming to steal our jobs. But if we are reporting like robots do, what will expect? So the search needs to be a search. It has to be active, proactive. You need to start looking for these kind of stories. And this is very important because the idea that, yes, we need to be inclusive. So let's allow these quotas, I told you before. Let's put one story every day. Let's put a symbol there to prove that we are inclusive. But what happens with the rest of the content in your media outlet? Is it inclusive or is it completely opposite? Because it's like a slogan, and we don't want slogans. So if we put one story every day, but then the rest of the content is completely opposite, it's not going to sound very well. Our idea is to have this philosophy, yes, that can lead to a transversal coverage in which inclusion is part of every story, not just the page with the inclusion story. But we need to start from something, and we can start from sections. And then it can shift naturally to all contents. We can start with sections. Being inclusive is not just writing a short color story or showing a 20-second video to show that we are good. It has to be much more than that. The idea that the top news, the main news, and the viral content is not inclusive is wrong. I've showed, and I have many examples that will show you that in every top news and every viral content, there is a potential inclusive angle to take advantage of, because we are here to compete. It's not that we are here to make this without competition. We are competing against other media outlets. We are competing against other journalists. We want our content to be better, to be different. We want more readers and more viewers on our videos. So it's part of what we are as journalists. And the storytelling is critical to provide the story to the audience. So the perspective offers endless possibilities of storytelling, because if everyone is reporting about the same situation, goal, that a VAR decision, everyone is reporting that, it's going to be a standard coverage. But what about these stories that no one has taken the chance of exploring? So you will have endless possibilities of beating the other medias. And this is important because eventually you will find someone that will tell you that, yeah, it's not interesting. Now that story, it's not interesting. If you propose, and I know this kid that he's in a wheelchair, oh no, it's not interesting because we're looking for something different. So let me tell you this, because many of the people that are only looking at the metrics are not even journalists. They are here. They took a very important place that wasn't created. And some of the journalists said, no, I don't care about the metrics. And some other people came in, and more accountants than journalists. And they started to say, you need to write more about this, and this, because it engaged our audience, which led to having more stories about the WAGs, so the girlfriends and wives and girlfriends of the footballers than their families, for example. So again, it's very, very dangerous to only think with the algorithm. But I would like to prove that we need to understand that every sport inclusive story has the power of being a hit, has the power of being viral, has the power of having this guy or person that comes to you and say, hey, that was fantastic. You need to write more about this kind of content. But if it doesn't happen, and if someone tells you, you know, the kid you wrote about, the audience didn't read this story. So this is not part of the competition. We are here for something else. We are here to provide good stories, to promote inclusion. But if someone comes and tells you, no, the next time you will write about something else, you can say, yes, but what happened with the football stories that didn't get any hits, that didn't get any clicks? Will we wipe football from our contents menu because a football story didn't perform well? Of course, no. So it's completely wrong to put, in this case, a kid in a wheelchair, subject of an investigation of the metrics to understand if we can or can't keep writing about these kind of stories. Because probably if it didn't have any big audience, could be also because you missed the way to present it properly. The photo, the title, the approach, the way you've written it, the way you've edited the video, maybe was not good enough. So it's not about the kid itself. It could be about how we presented this story. Invisible against visible. Before wording, context, style, photo, everything that I mentioned before, comes a critical decision to feature or not to feature. Do we run this story? Do we search for this story or just forget about? I put something there. It seems easier in some cases to omit than to commit. So self-censorship, censorship, no, I'd rather not write about this because it will create a lot of problems. Maybe some people will say to me inside the newsroom, oh, you should have written about something else. So I won't write. You don't even propose. You think that it's gonna be a problem or you have to learn a lot of new concepts, so you'd rather skip it. Well, of course, we want to emphasize the importance of understanding that, yes, it could be an effort to write about a transgender athlete, because you need to learn a lot of things from the scientific point of view, but it's also an effort to write about financial fair play, and you need to learn a lot about finances and a lot about figures, and yes, and still you go for this story. So in the other case, it's exactly the same. Critical mistake that many will that happens in many cases is that a common way of making stories invisible is to remove names, to remove context, to remove emotions, or to pick another story instead. So if you remember, I have the example there later, but you all remember about if you have to name some characters that you weren't expecting to be featured in the Olympics. One of them, two of them, for example, came from shooting because of the viral photos, but one became quite famous because of in the boxing. And for many people, this character is just the Algerian boxer. There is no name. So that's the first mistake, you know. If you want to dehumanize something or someone, you start by not assigning a name. It's just the Algerian boxer. I have two examples here, and then maybe we can make a 5-minute break if it's okay to you, or you tell me in the chat. This is the first one. I'm just reporting facts here, so I'm not making an opinion. Rachel Gun, everyone knew her by Gun. She became famous for her performance in the breaking in Paris 2024. She became a laughingstock, she became a meme, she became a lot of things. And if you look in the past year, Google will tell you that there are more than 3 million results about this Rachel. In the same competition, though, there was something that happened with Manisia Talash. She was disqualified for showing the flag with the Free Afghan Women inscription on it. She was disqualified for this. 125,000 results last year compared to the meme. 3 million of someone that became a laughingstock, unfortunately, because she was competing in the Olympics, by the way. But so this is who we are as well as a society. And I taking some as an example, refugee breakdancer disqualified from Paris Olympics for Free Afghan Women cape. So yes, she was a refugee, but the name, the idea of not putting the name in the headline, in the title, is already creating some statement, is that we won't care about this anymore because we think that the people will not identify this name, so we don't put the name. What happens in the second story, in the third story? If you put the name in the first story, then the second story, the people will try to identify the name rather than the refugee breakdancer. Football language. This took place in a restaurant, and it became viral because there were two friends watching a football game with this board. One of them is blind, the other is looking at the screen, at the game, and they developed this language in order to understand from the blind's perspective, to follow the game, to know that there is a corner, to know who has the ball, to know a lot of things. And it's a fantastic opportunity from a non-genuine sports event, because it was the qualifiers for the World Cup. And this content became so viral that you can see there, the microphone, well, it's from China's television. So if anyone says to you, no, this won't be interesting, look, this is the power of sport. Only sports can produce these kind of stories, and sports transcend the game. Sports are about family, about people with disabilities, about people displaced, different ethnicities, different religions, different sexual orientation. It's about sports. So this is an example. There is another example here, same situation, but they are in the stadium, they are in the tribune, and the man on the right, he creates the game on the back of the blind person. So in that way, he can understand what is going on because of the screams of the people and everything, but he can also understand what is going on in the game. You wouldn't say that USA Today is very famous for covering football, right? But USA Today covered this story because it was interesting for their audience. So if anyone tells you no, because the metrics, the algorithm, well, I think I've proven you that even China and USA Today can go to Colombia just following some of these stories. They will not be interested in what was the result of the game. It's something much bigger than that. What about this other story? You can see the photo on the right. It was taken by someone, I will later tell you. This was Diego Milito's farewell game in Argentina at Racing Club. After winning the Champions League for Inter and everything, he returned to Racing Club. And this picture is a kid, two kids actually, trying to see, because there is a very high wall, and if you're standing there, you cannot see what is happening on the pitch. And one of the kids, you can identify he has a missing leg, so he lent one of his crutches to his friend. So this photo became viral, even more viral than Diego Milito's farewell game, you know. In terms of, you want to speak about metrics? Okay, this beat the actual news. This became the news worldwide. Who took the photo? The mother of the kid. So, and this kid was going to every football game before. None of the journalists felt it was too important to report about this kid. And suddenly the photo of the mother becomes a hit. And now everyone wants to speak about the kid. In the end, the kid not only is invited to meet Diego Milito, but also receives a new prosthetic leg by the club, because he couldn't afford to have a new leg. The family couldn't afford, they didn't have enough money to buy this kind of very modern prosthetic leg. So the story, the report of this story, which the source was the mother, could have been a journalist. I would have liked to be a journalist that was there and took this photo, because by one photo you can change a kid's life. This is another example. There is a journalist, in this case, it is a journalist that looks to his right and finds this kid following the game on the radio on the stadium, but he's in the stadium, but he cannot see because he's blind. And he makes a video and he talks to the kid. After the video becomes viral, people find out that the kid is actually the son of one of the club legends, but they didn't know about this before, which is also part of our understanding of when I said some media chose to focus on the wives and girlfriends to put some photos, and we all know who these media are. instead of focusing on the family, because the family of each player also has a lot of problems, a lot of situations that could be interesting to read, could be inspirational for other people with the similar situations. So this is another one, the elderly. It's another choice that we need to make as journalists. Do we care about the older generations or not? And you can say, yes, I care, but I haven't written anything about that. Well, you know, this was in the World Athletics. This person, 77-year-old, was on a tiny, tiny cart outside the stadium waiting to fix shoes. And he's been doing this for 40 years. And he was able to explain the difference between the stats for athletics, for some competition, for some other competitions. So this cobbler became well known because the AIPS, in this case, made a story about him. And some athletes that needed something very, very urgently, in the end, went to this guy because they were desperate, because there was a problem with their shoes, for example. And this is another way of telling a good story, because if you start reading that story, you won't stop. I can guarantee you that. It's so fantastic. He's been involved. He's met a lot of personalities, even in the Olympic Games, but no one was caring about this man. Everyone was covering the event. This is another example, also on AIPS. When I said about there's no need to put this by accident, you know, we need to start a proactive way of searching for these stories. So we assigned a name that later became a hashtag, that later became a section, Hidden Heroes, to tell good stories, positive stories about the people that were around the competition. In this case, it was the under-17 Women's World Cup, FIFA Women's World Cup. And this was a volunteer, yes, with cerebral palsy, and then later he became a journalist. But it's a story that itself defends without explaining to the editor, no, I need to feature this. No. Now I have the hidden heroes section. So you can see on the left, a lot of different stories were assigned to the same sections. When you succeed in transforming a story into a section, you will no longer have to explain to your editor because he or she will be asking you, who's the next one in this section? So you don't have to sell the story in order to be published. You just have to make a repetition following the same approach. So we understood, we searched, and now we have to execute. Execute means don't make mistakes in the way that we present these stories, because we've managed to understand the importance, we've managed to search and to find these stories, and now we have to put it right. So best practices for inclusive reporting, starting with avoiding cliches. One short story, we were in Jordan for the Under-17 Women's World Cup, FIFA Women's World Cup, and we were invited to the biggest Syrian refugee camp in the world, with 100,000 people inside that camp. And I remember Nadine was part of that group. we went there and I told them personal biases, it's going to be a place with a lot of suffering, that place. So please, you don't want to be taking pictures as if we are going visiting some touristic place, just be respectful for that. And in the end, I was completely wrong. But I was wrong because the first time we were on this van and all the kids approached to us and they started to wave their hands and say hi and smile at us, I understood that it was going to be a visit to enjoy. And actually, we postponed the return. We ended up playing football in their football pitch. The pitch that was originally artificial turf, and they had cut the artificial turf in squares to provide insulation for their homes. Can you imagine? But it was one of the best experiences I had as a journalist. And you can say, yes, I was thinking of a place full of suffering. I couldn't imagine all the smiles from these kids before going there. And I cherish those smiles now. But if you only write from afar without approaching to the stories, then you can write something that completely misses the point. One of the dangers, even with very good intentions, is to put by accident or because of ignorance, to put some diseases or syndromes as adjectives. And this is important to cut it from the beginning, because if someone is not answering in a resolute way in a press conference, we cannot say, as it's been written, his replies, his answers were a little bit of autistic, because that's not an adjective. A team is never schizophrenic, because if a team is disorganized, you need to put that the team is disorganized, but it's not schizophrenic, because it doesn't look good on you. And if someone that you interview say these kind of terms, you need to interrupt and say, that many people will feel offended because of what you've just said. So again, there's awful use of the language, even by, well, I don't start speaking about politicians and so on, but yes, even some Down syndrome were put as a way of describing people that were not reacting in a way, politicians, for example. So we need to cut this from the beginning. What about inclusive vocabulary? Well, inclusive vocabulary in every language now, I'm sure that you all have the opinion, the bias, and you've heard about the controversy of should we use the new inclusive language that kids are using because the plural is not feminine or whatever. Our recommendation will be to respect if the use of pronouns, for example, if someone that we would say he wants to be a them, well, we respect that athlete's decision in case someone clearly expresses this, because to not respect means to disrespect actually what he, she, or them chose. And in the end, we will have to make a self-assessment, ask ourselves some questions. We didn't publish yet. We didn't put anything on social media. We have the story, we identify the story, we cover the story, we have our material, and then we have to ask ourselves, will this be controversial? Is it necessary to put on social media what I'm about to put? Is it responsible? Is it balanced? Can someone feel offended or damaged? Will it affect my reputation? Will it affect my media outlet's image and reputation? And finally, am I ready to respond on social media, and how? It looks very easy, but if you see some of the examples I have, it's not that easy. This is a good example. This is a story about exclusion. So every story in the end has to be described in one word. This story is about exclusion. It's about the people that live in the poorer communities in Hungary. And it received one of the special mentions in the last edition of the AIPS Sport Media Awards. It's very, very thoughtful, and it's very respectful in the way it is written. Because if you, I'm sure that most of you won't understand the Hungarian, but it presents the story starting from one of the kids. It never says, say in the title, gypsies, for example. One of the kids introduces himself, and then we should go back to our camp and then the gypsy appears there. So this is part of a catching up settlements program created by the government in 2019. So after 4 years, if you didn't know about this, it doesn't happen by accident. It's been taking place every year. So you can go and search for these stories, and then search for the stories inside the stories, which is the stories of these kids. Some of the stories were awful to read, but I couldn't stop reading because it involved drugs, abuse, a lot of things that were happening to these kids that in the end they wanted to play football to escape of their reality. That's another positive story, even in a very negative context. It's about refugees. The key aspect is to focus on the story, not on your interpretation of the political context, because this was written 6-7 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, but the situation with the refugees, especially in Italy, is still going on. And there are views from the politicians, there are politics, new rules rose in the European, in Brussels, in the parliament. But this story is about these footballers, that all of them were refugees, that were living in a place, in an actual hotel in Calabria, in Italy, until they were accused of stealing the jobs of the locals, and some people set fire to that hotel and tried to kill them all. And with that start, awful start, because the involvement of a priest and the idea of printing leaflets to call these people to play football, one of them went. Then the word of mouth, he said, okay, I will bring some friends. And in the end, they formed a football team that ended up representing the town that tried to kill them. And they became the proud members of the town that tried to kill them before. So you see, this is a fantastic story, and it doesn't involve about the refugees laws. No, it's about human stories. But what about this one? And you can see some of the examples I have are from very prestigious media outlets. In a country like Mexico, in which the level of women killed by men is the highest, among the highest in the Americas for sure, and in the world. This line, there is some noise. Yes. I'm not sure where the noise is coming from. Nadine, can you mute? Okay, thank you. This line is very unfortunate. Pioneers of gender equality, the Aztecs sacrificed women as well as men. So if it was meant to be funny, it's not funny. If it was meant to be informative, there's no need to put pioneers of gender equality. And in the end, the backlash they received was, completely avoidable. Is this the best title for a story that in a country that is devastated by war? An unexpected result of Yemen's war, more men are cooking and cleaning. So again, you can see there is no need to put this title. And maybe you wrote the story, you have no influence on the title whatsoever, but the title will create a lot of people criticizing you on social media. You can say, I have an inclusive approach. I want to cover an inclusive story, like this America's Cup. But the wording, the poor choice of wording, backfires. So the translation reads, First America Cup played by dwarfs to stimulate integration, overcome prejudices and discrimination towards that group. You can see those two words in full caps are completely wrong because, first of all, that group is more discrimination than integration. And the actual words they should have used is, in English, small people. In Spanish, it wasn't enanos, it was talla baja. So again, wrong choice of words. What about this one? Juventus, we already said we are competing media outlets with the football clubs creating content. And this is Juventus Women, the official account of Juventus women's football team. And they published this story ahead of a trip they were going to do in China, I think. So not only the photo production with a cone and the gesture, but also the emoji production that probably took a lot of thinking how to put this gesture with emojis. And well, the idea that this is not racist, that many said from the country and from some countries, is opposed to how many? 2 billion people saying that this is racist. And the statement of Juventus produced even more backlash because they said, we are sorry if someone felt offended. So someone, the idea of someone, 1, 2, not 2 billion people. So again, to understand is to save some potential crisis, to understand. Breaking news. Some of you remember this, Barcelona playing, and then Sergio Agüero suddenly starts having this chest pain, and then he's rushed with breathing difficulty to the dressing room and to the hospital. What is this emoji? You can see it, it's very big. You can see it. Probably none of you will share the same vision for this emoji. But when you see it, in the small version, as the one I put there, it looks like a smile. And when you see it on your phone, it looks like a smile. So even if this official explanation is anxiety, something like that, it was completely wrong to start the coverage, live coverage of someone that could be potentially dying, we don't know this, with this, with an emoji, Every emoji, in this case, is not applicable for reporting breaking news of this seriousness. Finally, reflect. So remember, we started with understand, and search, execute, and reflect. After you publish one of these stories, you need to ask yourself, what have I learned? What are the challenges for the next story? The strategies, there's an S missing, to promote equitable representation. What have I learned or discovered also about digital violence and digital gender violence, if you're a woman especially, because just by publishing some of the stories, you will receive some reaction, and some reaction can be because of the words you chose, the approach you had, but also can be just because you are a woman, unfortunately. So there's a lot of information. We made some courses also about digital gender violence and how to tackle certain behaviors. And finally, humor and credibility. I try to make a joke. Yes, Juventus will probably say, yes, we never try to harm someone on purpose. Of course you didn't. But if it was humor, did you know in advance that the situation was going to unfold that way? Can you imagine that some people will feel offended? So if you can imagine, avoid that. The idea that, yes, because we need to be very precise, but we need to become boring because we cannot make any jokes. No, that's not the way. But if your jokes are offensive and you're doing this on purpose, or you're doing it without knowing that there is going to be digital violence coming, chasing you, well, you should ask yourself, was it normal in this context to say these words, to make these jokes, or I could have avoided that. After publication, ask yourself, did your story make an impact? What follow-up actions can you take? This is very important because some of the stories are worth enough. A second story, chasing the story, recreating after 1 year. And if we forget, you're missing also a valuable opportunity for you. And was it personally rewarding? And I'm sure that you will be able to answer, yes, it was personally rewarding to put this on the website. Now, some other examples. I'm not interested in a name, but if your opinion is that Novak Djokovic has suffered an excessive punishment, and then your opinion 2 years before was that Serena Williams acted like a sore loser, Djokovic reacted and the ball hit some official's neck, if you remember. And Serena reacted because of a wrong call, and then the discussion ended with a penalty for her. So your reputation will sink because the people will find out that you're targeting someone, maybe because it was your original opinion and it's all in your mind, in your bias, but someone will tell you, yes, you are punishing women and you are defending men, you're punishing Black women. So again, you need to be balanced, and your judgment needs to be balanced as well. Which of course is not this case. the idea that there is a preview of Roma Inter and there is the Black Friday coming was like an instant hit for this cover. The director of this newspaper decided to put two black players, Smalling and Lukaku, and to put the Black Friday as title. You can imagine the bomb that this meant. But you know what? Even if Lukaku, Smalling, every player discussed about this, the clubs made statement, other European clubs made statements. The newspaper answered with some extra cover, asking themselves, to whom do you say that we are racist? Because we published stories about racism in the past, which is a little bit like I have a friend, and you know this because it's normal in most languages, unfortunately. So this is not a valuable argument, you know, to say we published in the past, instead of saying we made a very, very big mistake. And the idea that, sorry if they felt offended, our idea was to exalt them. Again, is not about them, it's about the ignorance of what's written. Which leads us to Iman Khalif and what I said before, the Algerian boxer. So it's not Iman Khalif on the title, it's the Algerian boxer. And if you look at the photo they chose, I think they were already trying to make a statement with the photo on the right, because there are other photos that could have been even better for the composition, to put her smiling on the left and then probably on the right as well. But the idea led to some articles that I have saved, and one of the articles, for example, finishes with this line: "Hats off, sir. Oops, miss." So in that way, you don't need to think much. The author is trying to be disrespectful on purpose, and he's trying to be hurting someone on purpose. Iman Khalif was one of the most abused athletes in the Olympics. The case became a case not just for IOC, but also for politicians. And you know what? What would have happened if she, in her tiny room with the cardboard bed, decided to take her life because she couldn't cope with all this abuse? Were we supportive, or were we just trying to, oh, let's write about her, let's write about her, without caring about the actual human being? And this is a question that you need to ask yourself, and you will know the answer. Mentally ill, used as a way of describing people. This was a very famous photo taken before the final of Copa Libertadores in Argentina. And the mother of this kid was putting some fireworks around the waist of her daughter, because she will be able to dodge the security search, the police search, because they don't search inside kids. And the photo became viral for, of course, very sad photo. But this journalist, even if trying to say something positive, he made a big mistake, because he put a country of mentally ill people. And the instant reaction was, even from institutions, saying mentally ill people will not wrap their daughters in fireworks to avoid a police search. Mentally ill people are not violent per se. So please allow, because we already face a lot of finger pointing in our daily lives, in order to have even an extra article writing about the mentally ill people. Abuse. These are some statistics I've taken from Tokyo, run by World Athletics. Just to have an idea, 80% of the abusive posts in Tokyo, after looking into 240,000 tweets to 161 athletes, 80% of the abusive posts were directed to women. And half of these abusive posts were about sexual remarks. And to finish, because we are already wrapping up, and I want to open also for questions. So if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand. But I have something very quick to show. The moment in which we need to understand is if some content is going to be a meme or is going to be a theme. And this is a critical decision that we need to make sometimes before even deciding to publish this on our media outlets. It's more for your own social media. Are we taking a news seriously, or are we taking it from the funny angle? So, Edinson Cavani, playing for Manchester United, replies to a friend on Instagram by saying, "Gracias, negrito." What's the translation? Thank you, little negro, if you want. Negrito is a way that, especially in Latin American countries, is normally used between friends. And this was a friend. Negro is also one of the most common nicknames that you will find in every South American squad. Every squad will have someone nicknamed Negro. Unfortunately, this is not racist, but Cavani should have known this before publishing, because it was in England, and then it was seen as a racist remark, and he received a suspension for that. And the idea of knowing is to avoiding. So if he had known in advance, he could have avoided this. So someone tried to make a very serious matter as if he was a racist guy. Well, unfortunately, it was the wrong call, but he should have known also. What about this one? Player of the week receives a set of pants as prize. This happened in Paraguay. Is it funny? Is it a meme? Or is it something very serious? You will find this story and you will have to make a decision from the European perspective if this is funny to share on your own social media, or if this is something that is not only happening in one country but in many countries, with the conception that women should stick in the kitchen, stay in the kitchen, don't play football, and a lot of other prejudices. So again, the idea of, oh, I will share because it's funny. Martin Odegaard, at the time at Real Madrid, then at Arsenal, this is a screenshot when he was playing for Real Madrid, decides to close his Twitter account for abuse. There was a fake news, by the way, a very elaborate fake news, which involved some teammate, and the main subject of this fake news, which I will not share in detail, was homosexuality. And he decided to close his Twitter account, because of the abuse he was suffering. And is it funny or is it something very serious? And the second question is it okay for someone to close his account because of the abuse, for some fake news regarding homosexuality, or he should have stayed to combat all the people saying or making fun because there was a story about homosexuality? Of course, we cannot judge his decision, but we can write opinion articles and make this a serious matter instead of a funny matter. Phil Foden and Mason Greenwood caught bringing girls to England team hotel. Bringing girls, is it the correct way of expressing, or is it objectifying girls as if they were some objects that you take to the team's hotel? Again, your decision, your call. Are these Zapata and Cornet the same person? Well, again, you need to ask yourself, is this respectful? Will there be people that will feel offended? Because in the end, if you're offending a lot of people, you should avoid this kind of content. And what about this one? Antoine Griezmann becomes Harlem Globetrotter. There was a lot of controversy about this. The same situation with Cavani that said Griezmann should have known that this was offensive. And then there is a lot of discussion in the Latin countries. Oh, but it's not offensive. It's just to depict yourself better. Well, you know, if there are billions of people feeling offended by the blackface, you should know and you should stick to the skin that you are given, and you should never make this. Another example, manager asks before the press conference if there are prostitutes or homosexuals in the press conference. And someone decided to put the emoji, as you can see there, faithful to his style. So the idea of putting an emoji there, not understanding the seriousness of this remark, do you know what happened? FIFA suspended this manager immediately in the same week because he was so disrespectful. One more example, Argentinian football associations distributed this document to the people that were going to assist to the World Cup in Russia. And some of this content included how to pick up women in Russia. Don't be negative. Russian girls hate boring men. This kind of, you can see on the top right, education, AFA education. So this was actually a document leaked in this country. And the situation, of course, it's a scandal, but if you take it in a funny way, you're missing the point. This is the photo of the president of the Argentinian Football Association offering his apologies to the director of the Russian house. He chose to take flowers. So again, you can understand how the level of thinking of certain people immediately by the document before and now by the gesture of taking flowers to knowing that she was a woman. Another case, very, very famous. Jordan questions the gender of Iran's goalkeeper, and many people took this as a funny story and made a lot of memes and so on. But it's actually very serious because can you imagine what's a gender verification check? Can you imagine what that is? To put yourself naked in front of some doctors that will decide if you're actually who you claim to be, if your gender is the one that you claim to be. So again, a very, very serious topic that one Iranian journalist chose to follow, and the interview that he made with this goalkeeper ended up winning the short feature of the AIPS Sport Media Award. So I have a lot of more examples, but opening now to the questions, if there are any. And I think we are already past the 2 hours, so everyone is invited to remain for the goodbye, but if you have other commitments, of course, I will understand. I hope you have enjoyed, and if there are questions, we are here with Elena, with everyone to
Yes,
answer.
kindly use the raised hand function so we can unmute you.
I see also Yura. I haven't checked the name, so hello, Yura Osmek, AIPS Secretary General. It's nice to have you here, Yura. So are there any questions or remarks that you want to make before we break off? Nadine, you please tell me if you see anything. I'm moving
Yes.
between two computers.
So what is next from this workshop? So basically everyone will get those who attended, we have them registered and will be receiving a certificate of attendance, a card. But those who would like to follow until the finish line to obtain the seal certification, whether for you or your media, I will be sorry, I will be contacting you by email, or you can just send me an email and I can send you the documentation that is needed to, or the steps that is needed to obtain the certification. Of course, the seal is from 3 levels, gold, silver, and bronze. There's quantitative and qualitative actions and dissemination and something you do on your work to obtain each level. For example, to obtain the bronze level, you need to participate in this workshop already done. Write an article that is inclusive, or a photo, a video, any of your production, multimedia production, at least once a month for 12 months. So things like these. It's not like something you do extra. You just register what you are already doing as a journalist, as a media professional, in order to obtain the seal. The seal is like the ISO standard certification of a journalist or a media professional. This is starting from the European Union and supported by the European Union Commission. However, we plan in the future to make this worldwide. Like just like any agency, any company has an ISO level, us too, we will have like a SIMS seal. So this is let's say a new era in modern sports journalism, and I think it would be a great idea to join in to the finish line. If you have any questions, please ask me or raise your hand.
And also, Nadine,
Manuel,
what will follow now?
yeah.
What will follow, sorry, what will follow now is that you will also receive the modules that our partners have prepared so carefully during months in order to have this way of consulting, learning, and interacting with this content. And also the glossary, which, as I said before, it's going to be a work in progress all the time, because we will be adding. I think everything will be a work in progress in terms of every year we will discover some coverage that could have been done in a different way or should have been done in a different way, or maybe we have a different approach to that inclusive, potentially inclusive content. So please try to be in touch. You will also receive the questionnaire, the feedback questionnaire, and please answer that, because the feedback for us at least level in this pilot project is super important, to have the feedback, to understand what things need to be improved, changed, explored with more depth. And please take your time to answer to those questions that you will receive in your mail.
Yes, this project is for us partners, AIPS, AIPS, España se Mueve, all of our 5 partners. It's a 30-month project. So for this pilot program, we really appreciate your input. So anything now, I will be sending you by email documentation if you would like to follow the certification seal in order to obtain it, and also a link which is like the registration, but like a post workshop questionnaire, which have the space for you to express yourself, like how did you see this course, how would it be enhanced, also after reviewing the documentation we will be sending you.
I'm adding also on the chat my email address. So if you have questions that you are too shy to ask, but you want to share something, also if you need advice on some topic that you imagine that it's going to be sensitive and you need an extra hand on how to handle this or what happened in the past, I'm very happy to answer and to be in touch. So I'm putting my email address on the chat. Please send me a message whenever you need. And of course, the stories I presented here, they were selected by myself. It's part of what we usually do in the Young Reporters Project with AIPS as well. The views I presented were entirely personal. So I accept if someone was not entirely in agreement with what I said, but the important thing is to understand about these 2 levels of sport inclusive events and inclusive approach in non-genuine sport inclusive events, because they are an incredible source of beautiful, positive, viral stories to be waiting to be told. So let's focus on that, and then we can see, of course, all the mistakes that we make in the process, because it's normal. We are human and we are full of biases, as I said before. So if there are no questions, I will say goodbye.
Martin,
yeah, and Jura.
I am a little bit shy, so I will not ask a question, but I will thank you for this, and thank to all these wonderful people who were with us. And please contact us, or Nadine, or Martin, or AIPS directly, or anybody from our group, because we want to learn from you as much as you learn from us. Thank you very much for that. And thank you very much, Martin, for this very, very nice presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jura, and especially thank you to everyone that attended. And again, I say hello to all the people that were familiar names, because they compete in the AIPS Awards, familiar faces because they were young reporters as the one I said, or faces from the AIPS family as well. And to all the partners, again, thank you. See you next time. Please send an email to, as Jura said, to any of us if you need anything, okay? Bye-bye.
Bye.